Okay. Hi, everybody. Good to see you again. Oh, that's nice. That's so nice. I think I put a thing. Ah, there it is. Do you remember this quote from November? Actually, raise your hand if you were here in November at one or both of the presentations. That's a good chunk of people in the room. As much as I can see the people who are not raising their hands, can you raise your hands too? Who was not here during that time? It's okay. I'm going to give a little bit of a rewind, a little overview. And the best part about it is, people who weren't here, is that our media team has created a whole little website that has my sermon that kind of kicked off the thing. It's got both weeks recorded, and there's something else, because I know there's 4, and I don't know what the 4th is, but I bet it's awesome. So you can go back and watch all of that and experience it all over again, but I'm going to lead us in a conversation, and the best thing is that even if you weren't here, you're still going to learn a ton from all the people who are around these tables, so that's wonderful. So back in November, I not so gently nudged us all to begin thinking and having conversations with our loved ones about the end of our life. So many of you have already done the logistical stuff. This is the getting your wills in order and picking a power of attorney. That stuff is super, super important, yes. So we're going to keep raising our hands for a little bit. Raise your hand. How many of you have a living will completed? All right. How many of you have chosen a power of attorney or a healthcare proxy? Good job. Who has done some memorial service pre-planning? Oh, look at you. How many of you that just raised your hands have that on file in the pastoral care office? Deb, me! If you don't, can you please give that to me? Thank you. Who has created a list of important documents or passwords and things like that? Kinda, sorta. That's one that's always in flux, right? Yeah, absolutely. If you haven't done that stuff, continue to work on it. Thank you for doing that. But that was not, ooh, I just did something crazy. Oh, there we go. That was not really the main focus of our conversation back in November, if you remember. It was not exactly what I was asking of you. I was encouraging you to talk about your life, your wishes for how you want to live up to the very end. I was encouraging you to talk about what matters to you, how you want to be, where and what you want to do, and what it looks like or what it means for you if that isn't possible. That is the really hard conversation that I was urging you to have. So I introduced to you the conversationproject.org. You should write that down. There is paper and pens in your table situation, I'm pretty sure. I see them. The conversationproject.org. Who actually went to the website after I was talking about it for a while? A few of you. Good job. The conversationproject.org is full of a bunch of free resources. They are free, and we also printed some of them out here. Some of the free resources we then had printed, but you can just do them on your computer as well. But I know that a lot of you like to have a hard copy of things. We brought some more tonight so you can take a look at them. So one of the things that I handed out was the Conversation Guide Workbook. It is this one. Dun, da, da, da. This is step 1. This is getting you thinking about where you are on a bunch of different scales and about a bunch of different topics, and then offering you a framework for having a conversation about that with your loved one. We talked about the importance of who to have that conversation with. We even talked about maybe choosing someone different than who you originally thought. We watched a silly little video that ended up being actually kind of helpful, and I shared with you about my own personal story of my parents changing their minds on who their healthcare proxy would be after we got some one-on-one situation with my brother who determined was not the best, and it was truly me. So we made a change in my family, and that's great, and it's okay to do that. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to do that, but you have to make sure that you have a conversation with that person. Add another voice to the conversation. So we talked about all those things. We also talked about how this is your loved ones. It's not necessarily your family. I know that for so many of you, family is not the safe place to have this conversation, or family lives really far, or maybe there is no family left. And so you are here and you've got friends, and that is the best thing about church, is you are surrounded with people who can help have these conversations with you and hold you accountable to have them back. The second thing that I handed out was the What Matters to Me workbook. It looks very similar to this one. It's this. It's also for free right there on theconversationproject.org. The What Matters to Me workbook. This is a more in-depth workbook. This is one that is great for those of you who might have been diagnosed with something, or your life circumstance has really changed and it's time for you to revisit your wants and dreams and things in light of that new diagnosis or something like that. This is a fantastic one to even take a look at, even if your life circumstance hasn't changed. This is a great one to get you thinking and talking even deeper than the Conversation Starter Guide. So we handed those out. Next, we talked about memorial pre-planning and the First Community Foundation. We started talking about what that looks like to plan your memorial service. We handed out a document that lives on the First Community Church website as well, which is a pre-planning document. It's on the celebrations and care section of the website. You can find it there. You can find it up here as well. This is a great document that really helps the pastoral care office write down some things, write down your wishes, and most importantly, it's got contact information on it. You might think that we know all the names of your children and your loved ones and where they live and their names and how to reach them. We don't. We try, but we don't. So please tell us. It's so helpful for us. So we talked about that, and I shared that so many folks have been coming in to my office to plan their parents' memorial service, and they have no idea where even to begin. And we talked about what a gift these conversations are to our loved ones, how it isn't easy or fun, and there certainly is never a good time to have it, but that it's such a gift when we do have these conversations. So, dun da da da, did you do it? No. Okay, if you came in November and you intentionally had a conversation about this with someone, please raise your hand. Wow, so proud. Okay, yeah, we should clap for you. Good job, thank you. Well done. If you are still planning when, where, who to have it with, raise your hand. Very good. If you are still worried or not sure how to go about it, please raise your hand. Yes, thank you for your confidence in raising your hand. Thank you, thank you. Well, I'm back, baby, and I told you I was going to hold you accountable for having these conversations, reminding you that this isn't a one-and-done situation either. So even if you were one of those people that raised your hand and said, yes, I had a conversation, you are not done. You are not done yet. These are conversations that we are meant to return to all the time. So I want to tell you a little bit about what I have heard since November, because there have been a number of you in this room, and I'm guessing there's more, because I don't see people who I know who have had this conversation. So they probably thought they were done and they didn't have to come back tonight. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I have heard. I have first heard that a lot of you have embarked on these conversations, and I've heard that some of you have never thought about the little stuff. That was the big thing. Do you remember back in November, a lot of us were talking about, what are the tiny little things that might bother the heck out of you? Like having your blanket tucked in around your feet, and that would just drive you nuts, and you want to make sure that someone knows that you need to have your blanket untucked from underneath of your feet. That would be the worst thing ever to happen to you. Or that you hate being hot. That's me. If I was hot and I couldn't tell anyone that I was hot, I would really want someone to be checking in and seeing how hot I was. One that I heard about is someone really wanted to make sure that their sister knew that they wanted to have their nails painted. They wanted to make sure that at the end of life, their nails were beautiful, and they wanted their sister to do it. And this actually has become a bit of a family tradition for them, and I thought that was really beautiful. Turns out a lot of that stuff really matters in the event that you can't speak for yourself. And so I learned from a lot of you that there are little itsy-bitsy things that this actually made you think of while you were having these conversations. So I encourage you to continue to have those conversations about that. I'm trying to think if there's any more that I wrote down. Oh, someone really wanted to have fresh air. They said, I want to make sure that someone cracks a window at least once every single day so that we have fresh air in the room. Let's see. I have also heard that some of you were met with resistance when you tried to have these conversations. There's nods in the room. We're going to talk more about that today. Raise your hand if you have ever run into some resistance when trying to have a conversation about end of life. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. We will absolutely continue to talk about that today. I also heard some feedback that memorial pre-planning is hard, and it feels like you're just shooting in the dark and Googling things randomly. Does anyone feel that way? Did you not know how to go about it? What happened? Why did not too many of you do it? I only got like 6 back, so tell me why you didn't do it. So I handed out this document, Kitty, and I will give you this document, and you can take a gander at it. If you have written it down somewhere, like if you have even just like held, I know a number of you hold on to bulletins from memorial services that you've been to before, right? And you're like, I circled this one, I love that one, or you circled another scripture verse. I'm sure all of you have some little stash. It would be really wonderful if you compiled all that together and then let us know and had that on file here in the pastoral care office. That would be wonderful. And if you don't even go as far as to send it to us, it would be really great to at least tell somebody where that is and maybe make sure that it is labeled properly and that the circling isn't just circling, and maybe you've compiled it a little bit better. Because, I was just planning a memorial service this past week with a family, and I swear they got up from, we were sitting in the couch, they got up from the couch at least 6 different times to go and like find a drawer and pull out a thing. And then they got up and they went over to another part of the house, and then they grabbed another thing, and they were like, here are all the items we've found over the past week. Don't make your family do that. They really want to sit on the couch and sit with their pastor. So do that. Okay. Finally, I have heard that many of you have actually gone to the Conversation Project website and used their resources to have more conversations. I just spoke with someone a few weeks ago that asked for another conversation guide because they had a family member who had just gotten a diagnosis, and they were like, I feel like this is the exact conversation I need to have with this person. All right, let's do it. That's a great opportunity. Remember that this resource exists. Remember that you can go to the website and find it yourself, but you can also come to me. Okay, we're gonna do some reflections here together around the table. Okay, there's a lot of words on the screen. Look at me. Don't read it. Okay, this is what's gonna happen. So, around your table, you're gonna reflect. You're looking at me. So, you either had these conversations already or you've had some form of these. You're gonna follow the left side of the screen. Did you talk with your loved ones? Who did you talk to? Where did you have the conversation? Did you have more than one conversation? What surprised you? That's my favorite question. What surprised you about your conversation? How did it go in general? If you haven't had a conversation or you're still planning it, why not? That's the right side. Is there something you're worried about, a barrier to the conversation that you perceive? Where do you still feel stuck? So those are 2 avenues that you can take around your table, okay? I'm gonna release you for a decent amount of time. Make sure that you have everyone around your table share their experience. There's lots of questions to keep you talking up there, and I anticipate you talking for a long time. Does anyone have any questions before you embark on this journey? Okay, go. Okay, it's been 2 minutes. Is that okay? Okay. You're going to get to talk to one another another time, so don't feel like this was the end of the conversation. It was not. Thank you. So much conversation going on. This is one of my favorite things is that I get to join a table for a little while and hear what you're talking about. I would love for you to share out loud something you talked about at your tables. Maybe it was something that you learned, something that surprised you, maybe something that stuck with you from our conversations in the fall. It could be a question, I don't know, but share out from your tables. Yes, I'm coming to you with a microphone.
When someone at our table shared with their family member who got very angry, wouldn't accept it, wouldn't talk about it, and lo, these many months later, still not willing to even accept the conversation.
Wow.
And that can't be isolated.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm sure you're not alone. That is super tough. Super, super tough. Absolutely. What else did you talk about? I'm coming. Here I come.
I know you and I talked about this after the November time. I said I had not had that conversation with my 3 kids. What I hadn't mentioned, that one of the things that had spurred me at that point was my oldest daughter had given me a notebook with a lot of blank pages, and the title of the book was Dad's Story. Now I look through that and I've put a few things in, but I have homework to do. And I'm in the process of doing some of that. But that's one of the things that keyed me. I said, here I am trying to figure out when to have this conversation and put these 3 people down at a table, and we'll all have an equal part in the conversation. Then it was time to do it, and we started that process. Mm-hmm. We are not done. It's chapter 1.
I love that. It sounds like they were equally as ready to have that conversation as you were. Yeah. That's great. They just came at it in a different way. What else did you talk about? I'm coming.
I thought about, and we discussed a little bit at the table, was grief. And our checklist doesn't show how to deal with the grief. And the checklists provide a path, and the situation as far as the relationship when you stir in the grief part could change that. So there are facilities, I mean, the church, your close friends and so on, but that's a real thing that maybe a little pre-planning on that would help too, and say, okay, we got to put a cap on the grief the best we can and get on with our checklist, and then we can come back and try and work on the grieving, which I think is obviously difficult.
I love that you brought that up. So many folks, I even heard it at the table that we were talking about back here, that grief is a huge part of these conversations, and sometimes they're full of joy and there's fun memories that are shared and all sorts of things, but you never know where this conversation is going to lead, and that's part of the reason why a lot of us avoid it, right? We have no idea if that's where the conversation could end up, is just in a puddle of grief on the floor. One of the things I learned from this table back here is that you embarked on that conversation not knowing where it would lead, and you just listened. That was the key that I took away from that table. Just allowing us to listen and let the conversation flow as it will, not knowing where it would lead, and then coming back. That's why I continue to say that this is not a one and done. You might not even make it to the checklist of things that you have to do, because first you're dealing with all of the grief. And acknowledging that is okay, right? It's all about acknowledging that this is a really hard conversation. Remember when I told all of you that could be the very first line out of your mouth, is to say, this is really hard for me. And if it's not really hard for you, you could say, this could be really hard for you, who I'm talking to. But acknowledging that this conversation could go in a number of different directions, and one of those could be grief, that's okay. And there is still time. I think some folks also feel like they need to get through the list, right? They need to get through all of the things that we need to talk about, because there is so much It's okay to take the time. This is the most important conversation that you could have, because that's when all of the meaning making comes from there. Then next, you can kind of ask your questions. We talked about how, after we sat and listened for a long time, we're like, well, we can't continue this hour-and-a-half long conversation now, but I also have a lot of follow-up questions. So now we're going to come back to that conversation. But thank you for bringing up the whole idea of grief alongside of this. Someone else had, yeah.
Thank you. Elise at our table brought up the point about being very organized, which is what I think you're trying to get us to be. And if that organization and or that conversation with whoever ends up with us, if that conversation doesn't work, I've realized that it's probably very important to have that conversation highlighted, or like a Cliff Note version, to have that written and make sure that your executor knows about that. And then being organized allows us to take a load off that hopefully will allow us to have time for grieving while still getting some things done that need to get done, acquiring death certificates, et cetera. And will hopefully be a gift of some sort to whomever is responsible for taking care of us after life.
I love that. Thank you, Becky. Does anyone else want to share something you talked around on your tables? Yep, Sandy, I'm coming.
With my mother, we were we were forced to make some decisions about what to do when she died, because she had dementia, and because of her finances, she needed to go to a facility. So what they allowed us to do is, so much of the money from her home sale went to her care, but they allowed us some money to plan her funeral. So she died maybe 5 years after that, and the difference between having that all planned out, and it was, my mother was in a bed at a nursing facility, and I'm at the funeral home, choosing her casket. That was hard.
Yeah.
But when it came down to it, it was wonderful when she passed, that everything was taken care of.
Yep. I've heard that from a lot of folks, that, sometimes it feels kind of crass, right? I've had this conversation, especially like at Kobacker House or in hospice, that, death is impending, but it feels really wrong for some reason to talk about a memorial service when they're still alive or things like that. It's okay. That's all a part of our grieving journey too, that we get to have those conversations and have that person in the room still that is still a part of it. Very good. Okay, we're still gonna keep talking about this stuff. All right, we're going to keep talking about barriers. That's why I didn't ignore the fact that you said that everyone is very resistant, or we've come up against resistance. I wrote down a few that I have heard already. Maybe you have been talking about this around your tables as well, not just this one. Here are a few barriers that I have heard about. Just general avoidance of anything surrounding death. Adult children that are very uncomfortable having this conversation. That it's always inconvenient. That popped up at the table that I was sitting at. There is never a good time, ever, to have this conversation. I've also heard a lot about spouses who really disagree on how they want to go about things, and then that has created a clash in their relationship. And then just general confusion that there's so much paperwork and there's so much to do, and that just puts a halt to every conversation because it's just too much and overwhelming. I'm wondering if any of you have any additions to this list. Any other barriers that you have come up with? And if this table, if you know the answer why to that person who was so resistant to have the conversation, will you tell us? You don't know. Any other barriers to having this conversation you can think of? Yeah, go ahead. The geographical distance, absolutely. Timing? Yeah. Yep. Because it feels like you wanted to have it be a in-person conversation. I've heard that from a number of you, that it feels really important that this is a face-to-face conversation. Yep. Yep. Generational difference. Absolutely. I can't even tell you how many times I've heard from folks that they say, well, we didn't talk about this kind of thing back then. Or, or my parents said, we don't talk about this kind of thing. That permeates all of this. Is anyone familiar with that in their own families? Has anyone had that be a conversation? Speaking of geographical places, I've also heard that the South is a place that we don't talk about things like this. So I've heard that as well. Any other barriers that you can come up with? Yes, in the South. I've heard from multiple folks that in our southern states that they don't like to talk about death down there. Yes?
I think money is another
Money.
area where there's a lot of difficulty talking about the person that you're planning for, how much money they have, how's it being distributed. Just it's difficult. I know my parents, they never really talked about it until they got older, and then almost to a point where we knew that it was going to have to be talked about.
Right.
And they did, but it just isn't something that normally even comes up.
Yeah.
And if you do bring it up, I think there's usually some resistance.
Doug mentioned money, and that can go in all sorts of different directions, right? Because money is kind of a part of this conversation. So say the ultimate dream is to have you die at home. What does that look like? What money is required in order to make that happen? That then becomes a part of the logistical question of how to make it work in your family. But then there's the other pieces and parts of money. So say the conversation leads toward how much is left in a bank account in order to go somewhere. No one wants to talk about that. If there's anything that makes us feel uncomfortable, it's talking about money. That's one of those, 3 things that we just want to back away from. But you're so right. We have these conversations, and all of a sudden, money becomes a huge part of it. Thank you. Okay, so I want you to talk around your tables. I don't want to give up this conversation in a large group. I want you to talk about it in small groups around your tables. So, what resistance are you encountering, whether that's internal or external? What fears are still present for you? And what support would help you move forward in having these conversations that you were running into these barriers with? What support would help you move forward? I think to give you a little preview, just back here at the table that I was a part of, we talked about how some of us haven't had this conversation with our children, and we were talking about younger children. We've had this conversation with a spouse or with our parents, but what about our children? For those of you who have children or grandchildren who are 10 or 11 or 12, what does this conversation look like? And they feel like they don't have a great basis on how to have a conversation like this with someone who is young. So there's one example of something that they could really use some support with in order to have this conversation. All right, talk around your tables. Ready, go. Hello. I'm back. I know that wasn't very long, but it's 6:52, Ron. Okay, I specifically want to know about any support that you might be looking for, that last question. So if you talked about all the barriers, what fears are still present, things like that, what are you looking for that you feel like you don't have in order to have these conversations? Will you share that out loud if anyone wants to? Yes. Who would you want to be your executor of your estate? And that's what you're still struggling with. You never really know who it is that might be best. And that is, I've heard that struggle before, that, you think you have, like, maybe the oldest should be it. And then, I think we talked about this, Ron, didn't we? You're like, well, maybe the oldest should be the executor. And then come to find out, maybe they're not the right choice, and actually should be this person. And it's okay, and that's why I brought it up earlier again. It's okay to change your mind, too. and you want them to be in state if possible. That's so true. Yes? How to be a good executor. Yes, absolutely. So there actually are some tips and tricks on theconversationproject.org that can help you be a good executor. But one of the best ways that we can be a good executor is by having these conversations with your aunt, right? For like really knowing her core, what her values are and what matters to her helps you. 100%. This is both. This could be a conversation like, oh, well, since you said this about what you want, now that makes me think this is what I want. And it doesn't mean that your aunt has to be your executor, but it means that you're having a conversation about that. That's really good. Yes, Ron?
And the executor and the healthcare person do not need to be the same person.
I would suggest that they're not the same person. So the executor and the healthcare person probably don't choose the same person if possible. Yes, Barb? Mm-hmm.
About what really do I want in the end. And as we're talking about, what might happen, there could be Alzheimer's, there could be a stroke, there could be something that prohibits us from saying what we need in the end. But to have these things written down
Yeah.
is really, really helpful.
Absolutely. So Barb is just saying that like this is so important to not just have the conversation, but to write it down, to really take notes when you do have these conversations, because there could come a point where you can't remember, or maybe even the conversation ended up being so long ago that someone who does have their faculties can't remember. So absolutely, writing it down is the next step. And then the third step after that is knowing where you put it after you write it down. That's also very important. All right, we are rounding out our time together tonight, so I want to make sure that we get to these last few things. What's next? Oh, we have 4 minutes. Dink, dink, dink. Okay, what's next? I want to know what other topics you're interested in talking or learning more about, specifically related to end-of-life planning. What do you see as next steps for yourself, but also what do you see as next steps for the church? We have been doing a series called Getting Our Ducks in the Row, or something like that. Where's Jane? Is that what it's called? Getting Our Ducks in a Row. And we've been doing a series of different things. This is one of the installments of Getting Our Ducks in a Row. I want to know what it is that you still want to do. Yes, you look so confused. Oh, you have an idea. I love that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What kind of wisdom are you looking for, Erica?
Stories, life stories, think like NPR StoryCorps, like this happened once.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of funny, but there was a lesson at the end.
Uh-huh.
One of the biggest things I wish I had done, or I'm really happy that and it could start with like a prompt,
Mm-hmm.
maybe like a tree outside the church sometime, and then somebody writes it all down. I don't know. If I'm volunteering myself for something.
You always are. So the great thing that this reminds me of is that our dear member Trudy Krischer, got it, Trudy Krischer, she is leading a workshop. It just started today, yeah? Did you go? So Trudy is leading a, memoir writing, life story workshop. She has already ran this workshop at the Upper Arlington Community Center that was super well received. She's doing it now at the church. I think it's full one spot. We've got 1 or 2 spots. But if we need to bring Trudy back for round 2, I think it's a really great opportunity to do something like that, to write down your life story, to really put in some thoughts and wisdom to share with the rest of the folks. But I love the idea, Erica, you're going one step further. Like that feels like it's really for your family, and you're writing that down for your family. But you're saying, I want to do that at church. I want to hear the wisdom of that generation, of all the generations that we can kind of keep as lore around the church. I think that's a really cool idea. Maybe we weave that into another event that we do. I'm wondering about Mr. Rogers this summer. Okay, Any other ideas? Yes?
How to plan a memorial service that's not too little and not too much. What's a good recipe?
Yes.
How to think about it?
Karen said, how to plan a memorial service that's not too little and not too much. We want the right recipe for memorial services. That is something that Jane and I put on our list of things to do, to actually lead a memorial planning workshop, because that means that you are going to sit right here. You're going to get at least something down on paper by the time that we're done, so that I don't have to beg you over a microphone to turn it in. Yes, Joy, you have something to say. Absolutely. It can look like a whole bunch of different things, and I think it would be a great opportunity to get together and talk about what might be most meaningful for you, because the thing that I always share with folks is that memorial services are about the person who died, but they are for the people who are living. So remember that when you come to plan a memorial service. So yeah, that's on the list. Thank you, Karen. I feel like there was a third thing that we had written down. Does anyone else have any other suggestions? Oh, Jane and I also came up with, how do we go about it? Something about our stuff. We talk a lot around here, and folks share a lot with me about their stuff, that they're trying to like weed out some of their stuff or edit some of their stuff, or they're scared about leaving all of their stuff behind with their kids, all those things. But there is so much meaning in our stuff. And so I also think that it might be a great next step to kind of lead a conversation about what are the things that are things that are most important to us, and how we can have a conversation about editing and maybe keeping some and sending some on lovingly. I don't know what that looks like yet, but that's something that we had thought about, and I see some head nodding in the room, so that seems like absolutely, absolutely. Okay, great. All right, so to end our time together, I want you all, not just me, to bless each other, to continue to have these conversations. Unfortunately, I'm going to come back again and continue to hold you accountable for having these conversations. So let us bless one another as we go about these very hard but beautiful conversations. So let's read these together. You ready? May we leave no guessing for those we love. May our clarity be a gift. May our courage be an act of mercy. Amen. Go in peace.